G'day everybody and welcome back to the Hard Ball Gets AFL show driven by our friends at Mazda and the Mazda BT50 You Do Ute. Today we've got 6 points to get into, but first a reminder to get around thegame.com.au for all things AFL and waffle tipping with some huge cash prizes up for grabs. All right, let's get stuck in. It is the Hard Ball Gets AFL show. My name's Chris Robinson. It's a long season. We're doing a little bit of load management and giving some of the veterans a rest. So Xavier Ellis, Nick Rinn, you guys just take a seat on the pine today. And in for this afternoon's podcast, Jackson Barrett and a debutant, Jake Colvin. How you going, guys?
Oh, thanks, Robbo. You got your facts wrong there. This is the second time I've been on.
Is it really?
Hard Ball Gets. It was 4 years ago, so it's been a long time between drinks. I've been out of the team
Welcome
for a
back.
while, and then into the wilderness.
Should have looked more closely into our back catalogue. What was the nature of it? Just subbing in?
No, they just wanted an extra voice on, but only lasted an episode, so potentially I didn't do that well, and then got the boot. But we did it at the Cambridge Bowling Club, which was quite nice. Then I've just waited eagerly for about 4 years, and it's great to be back to see how the sausage is made, I guess.
So a bit of a West Coast COVID top-up feel about this, but that would make you Braden Ainsworth coming back for another dip.
It's 4 years on.
Yeah.
A full Olympic cycle later.
Declan Mountford still in the lift at the bounce sort of feel about this
Angus Stewart sort of. Yep. No, absolutely.
Gather round coming up, everybody. How have we found the build-up, the lead-up? We excited? We can't wait?
Crow's jersey is awesome.
Yeah.
FYI, I saw that today, modelled by Jordan Dawson. It's a fantastic, I guess it's a semi-replica of what they used to wear maybe 2013, 2010 sort of range.
Even earlier, I reckon. Who do you reckon's
the
first player that comes to mind? Because I reckon it's Andrew McLeod for me.
Andrew McLeod, Brett Burton.
Brett Burton took a mark of the year in
Scott Welsh.
Yep, good one.
Scott Welsh, great
Simon
answer.
Goodwin, another.
Rhett Biglands, the big guy.
What are your thoughts on the Dockers stealth gather round jersey? I know we might be chatting about Dockers, so I don't want to get it too Dockers focused. But
No, I really liked it. It wasn't dissimilar to the Adelaide one, really, in that they've kind of
the same
stripped it all back.
The silhouette
and
sort
then given
of
a bit of the outline. GWS have got one similar.
They actually copied Port's stealth training range. So, again, I'm not filthy about that, but I think a bit of trademark.
So you're a Port Adelaide fan. Let's just get this out into the open.
Yeah, 22 years now, so it's been my 22nd season of supporting Port Adelaide. It's been long and painful, but I might have to touch on a few things in a little bit about that, Robbo.
Well, we're looking forward to that. Should we get into our first point? And I'm going to go off the top here with a bit of a fixture gripe, and I'm pretty sure Freo fans are going to come along with me for the journey, because when the gather round fixture came out, this was something that was just bizarre to have a look at. So obviously we're fitting 9 games in the same city, so there's going to be a bit of funkiness with the fixture. There's 3 games that aren't at Adelaide Oval. Freo are one of those teams who go off Broadway, fair enough. They're one of only 2 finals teams from last year alongside Brisbane. Okay, fair enough still. But then the Friday afternoon slot that starts at 4:40 local time, which is 5:10 Eastern, you could stick any Eastern States team into this slot and anyone on the East Coast can have a look and watch their entire team. Freo fans in WA on a normal working Friday, this game starts at 3:10. So you've got no chance of watching if you do a normal 9 to 5 office job, you've got no chance of watching pretty much any part of this game. So Freo absolutely tutted by this fixture. The final insult was the mythical AFL coin toss that they did overnight that nobody got to see, that determined who's the home team and who's not. Freo even lost that, so they don't even have their choice of the rooms and when they want to come out first. I mean, this is just about the most off-Broadway fixture I can remember. Norwood Oval, 3:10 WA time on a Friday afternoon. Jacko, as a Freo fan...
Yeah, I'm filthy.
What say you?
There are 16 teams in the comp that this would work for.
It's bizarre,
and
isn't it?
And Freo's not one of them.
And I understand that you don't... The mitigating factor is you never look at the fixture just in a vacuum, and it's obviously set up to help next week's game, which is a big Friday night showdown for Freo at home against Rory Lobb, etc., etc. So
they could have been the Friday late game.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, even if you stick Freo on one of the Saturday slots and then they come home and play on the Friday,
6-day break.
I think that'd be fine. But for Freo to be it's not even off Broadway, it's off Broadway.
Look, I think the neutral AFL supporter probably wouldn't be too disappointed considering Fremantle haven't been terrific to watch.
A tough watch.
That's
right now.
true.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that at the time.
We did not know
when
that
the
at
fixture
time.
came
Exactly
out.
right.
We're going to have a lot of Dockers primetime fixtures coming up that are going to be a real slog to sit through because they've got Fridays and Saturday nights and they could get pummeled in a few of them. And I'm obviously a Freo supporter and they could be thinking, like zooming out here, they could be some pretty tough watches. I want to go back to the coin toss. What happens if Adelaide and Port Adelaide don't win their coin toss? Isn't it funny that they both won theirs?
It's had some people on Twitter suggesting that it might not have actually been a coin toss.
Yeah.
Knock me down with a feather. The funniest thing is just clubs coming out with their unis before the coin toss, basically.
Yeah.
So
for Adelaide, for example, like obviously they're the home team; they're always going to get the home game. But if Carlton had won that coin toss and then gone, well, we're wearing navy blue,
then you're not wearing jumper,
the jumper
because it's completely dark. Yeah, there's a few things that don't add up here. The Norwood Oval factor, and this will probably lead into your point in a second here, Jacko, about Freo and what they do. Skinniest ground in the AFL. Skinniest ground in the Sandful. Easily the skinniest ground in the AFL. So it's 110 wide. 110 metres wide. So for context, Optus Stadium is 130 metres wide. It's the same length at 165 and 20 metres shorter when you go laterally. So we'll probably lead into Jacko's point if you want to blow the siren in a second here, Michaela. Does that help them? Does that hinder them in terms of, does it force them to play a bit more direct rather than going side to side? I know you wanted to talk about the way that they move the ball.
Yeah, so the ball movement and also the forward line. So obviously we know that Matt Taberner has flown home. Mm-hmm. They've not sent over a like-for-like key forward. So Sam Sturt was on the plane to fly over. Josh Draper is there. He's been training as a defender, tall, athletic, can ruck, well and truly underdone from what we understand. But he's over there. Peter Bell said last week that he was comfortable if Draper was needed.
But he's more of a kind of Luke Ryan kind of backup guy, right?
So obviously Ryan saw back. He's been training as a backman, but he can obviously play forward if they needed to send out an SOS. And Sam Sturt played really, really well for Peel on the weekend. 2 goals, 4 marks, 4 tackles. So I think they're getting a little bit of the effort stuff out of Sam Sturt. But he's not a Taberner like for like. And maybe they are going a little bit more direct. You need that forward that's sitting a little bit deeper. Is that Sturt? It's probably not even Taberner. Taberner took 5 marks against Adelaide, but only one of them was inside 50. How often do we see him like marking 70 out and having to try and get on his bike to get back? So I don't know if it'll help or hinder them, but it's going to be a new look Dockers forward line. There's a watch on Michael Walters as well at training this week. So that could be an interesting one. We spoke with Zave a couple of weeks ago about, he spoke about Brayshaw. They ended up doing it with Switkowski with having like a pinch hitting high half forward coming up to the contest to sort of clear things out. Is that something they look at again, particularly with the skinnier pockets? They seem to do it in the Derby really well, but not a whole lot last week. So does Switkowski or an O'Meara or someone settle into a role like that to try and help? But yeah, keen to get your thoughts because there's not a Josh Corbett or a Josh Tracy going over to replace Taberner, and Sturt's a very different player, as we know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jake, does it concern you, the skinny ground and the fact that you're going to be having more contested ball, seemingly more contested marks, seemingly in the forward line? Does it concern you, the lack of potential targets that Freo might have here?
It actually doesn't. I think they need to change it up. There's been a lot of commentary around how tall they are and slow. Obviously, they started, I think, round 1, they had Tracy, Taberner, Fife, I think, those 3, and then obviously Jackson and Darcy.
Yep.
There's a lot of tall timber there. We go back years when Subiova was a thing. Subiova was quite skinny as well, notorious. I think it was about
122 wide.
Yep. So it's still not as skinny as Norwood, but I think why not change it up? Because at this stage, what they're doing, they're 1-3. Very realistically, could have been 0-4. Everyone knows that. But I think you may as well throw caution to the wind and go skinnier ground. Let's try and play a little bit more through the corridor, which you're going to have to. Bit more speed. Let's see how we go.
So is it Sturt for Taberner and then heavy emphasis on Jackson and Amos?
I think it has to be just about. Yeah, as you mentioned, there's no Corbett and no Tracy over there.
Yeah.
So it kind of handcuffs them a little bit. It's interesting to see that from a Gold Coast point of view, it looks like Jared Witts is in doubt again.
Yep.
We'll see the teams when they lob tomorrow, but gives someone like Sean Darcy a really good chance to feast on Ned Moyle, with the greatest respect to Ned Moyle.
He looked okay.
He did look okay,
Yeah.
but if Sean Darcy's a legitimate top 5 or 6 ruckman in this league, he should be giving Freo a really nice advantage at clearance, right?
Yeah.
You'd think so. I think Brodie did what he had to, go back to the waffle, absolutely dominate, come back, and geez, they missed him last week, didn't they? And I think Brodie's been a nice accompaniment in that midfield, but obviously hasn't hit the heights of last year just yet. So hopefully he gets back on board.
And just for reference, because Freo fans might not know a lot about Corbett, really good contested mark. At Gold Coast, tended to sit a little bit deeper, kicked 2 goals, 2 and 5 marks. Looked like their best contested mark for Peel on the weekend. Couple of tackles as well. So he looked promising. Still getting obviously settled in Perth, and how long they wait to give him a debut, I'm not sure, but he's got to be around the mark.
Jake,
this
floor
is me,
yours, mate.
Robert. Floor is mine. So look, I thought of a topic, and this is something in a lot of group chats that the debate is who's the best player in the game right now, as it is. There's obviously many opinions on who is the best, but I think quite easily from his performance against Hawthorn on the weekend, before I get into my top 5, I think Jeremy Cameron has a lot of on the top of a lot of people's lists.
Unreal.
Before I get into my top 5, I'll go through the coaches' votes leaderboard as it stands, and then I'll compare it to the list that I've compiled here. So Nick Dacos is number 1 with 25. Marcus Bontempelli, surprisingly,
that is
second
surprising,
with 23.
Yeah, that is
I haven't
surprising.
watched every Dogs game, but it kind of seems like he hasn't been that good this year. I haven't noticed him as much as I have in previous years. Tim Kelly has been great this season, well, maybe not round 1, but the 3 rounds after that. Jeremy Cameron 4th, and LDU is tied 5th with Christian Petrarca.
So before you go into your list, when we're criteria here, so you're talking just through the first 4 rounds of the season, who has been the best player?
Yep. So there's a couple of players in here which you'd probably say, like I'm going to straight away, Bont's not in here at the moment for me.
Agreed.
You might say Bont's better than a few of the players on this list, but after 4 rounds of criteria is who is the top 5 in my opinion.
Yeah, go for it.
So I've got 1, Jeremy Cameron. I think that's quite obvious. His game of the weekend was terrific. A few stats for you. 18 goals, so 4.5 goals a game. Almost 20 disposals, 5 inside 50s, 7 shots at goal. Over 8 marks and 436 metres gained for a key forward who also pushes up the ground.
Yeah.
That's insane numbers. So I think rightly so, I would agree Jeremy Cameron, and so would a lot of people, he is number 1.
And also given the fact that Geelong, up until half-time on Monday, hadn't been delivering the ball or moving the ball particularly well to him as well, all right?
Well, imagine if he wasn't playing at the level he is at the moment, where would Geelong really be, and their outlook would be pretty grim.
Well, they also might have been 5 goals down at half-time or more.
Yeah.
Very much so.
100%.
Number 2, and there's a lot of people you could have put number 2, but I think Clary Oliver, for me, is rightly so number 2. So some stats on him. 32 and a bit disposals, and 16 of them are contested. So 50% of them basically are contested. Over 7 clearances, 8 tackles, over 500 metres gained, 9 score involvements, and over 6 inside 50s a game. So for me, for a midfielder to do that, Clary used to be just a bit of an extractor, but now he's kind of adding a few more strings to his bow.
Yeah.
And he was really good against on West Coast on the weekend. I think he had 30-odd and 10 tackles.
Huge second quarter.
Melbourne just look like they're humming, and he's probably the main reason.
I think
for that.
It sort of started last year and into this year as well. He's leapt out of that Darcy Parish, Jack McRae high accumulator category and learnt to be really damaging around the stoppage, more direct. He's probably learning a little bit from Christian Petrarca maybe, but he's obviously like this contest bull. But his use has gone up and his penetration's gone up as well. So I've actually got him really close to number 1.
He could have had that number 1 title. I just think with the Jeremy Cameron being a key forward and averaging 4.5 goals a game and 20 touches, it's hard to compete with that. But Clary definitely top 2. So number 3, and again I tossed up who was going to be 3 between these next 2 blokes, but I put Charlie Curnow. I think he's a match winner. He's kicked 16 goals, averages 6.5 marks, and 3 of those are inside 50 a game, which is pretty great numbers for a key forward. And again, he doesn't always sit deep in the goal square. He works together with Harry Mackay, which I don't think is the easiest thing for 2 young key forwards to necessarily, not that they can't coexist, I think they absolutely can, but chemistry-wise, you both got to have a bite at the cherry. So Charlie Curnow's been exceptional for Carlton this year, and I think he is probably one of the most sought-after players, but he's obviously signed that monster deal with Carlton. I think a lot of people would probably be picking him straight away. Would you have him throw, you think?
He's around... Yeah.
Mark?
He's around that mark, somewhere between 3, 4, 5 for me. I think obviously him and Mackay coming through the system together. Like, how often do teams go and like pluck key forwards from elsewhere at 25 or 26? And the fact that these guys have ridden out the rebuild together is why their chemistry is so good, because so many other key forward pairings in the league get together when they're 25, and these guys have been doing it, injuries aside, since they were 19, 20.
Absolutely. And number 4, and people actually said this after his game against Port Adelaide, is he the best player in the comp? I've got Nick Dacos. Obviously, as I said before, you might be picking Bontempelli overall or those sort of guys over him for a season, but right now he's definitely a top 5 player in the game.
Through the first month of the season.
His stats that I looked today, which are they really jump off the page. 34.5 disposals. I actually didn't realise he was averaging that much. I thought it was like high 20s. At 85% efficiency by foot, which is insane. And he kicks it a lot. 4.5 inside 50s and 560 metres gained, which is insane for a player of his age. I watched the game against Brisbane. He did a kick out in the last quarter. He kicked one up the corridor, got a handball received, played on, kicked it long to the wing to like my check, then they got an inside 50. Like, teams can't be letting him do that, and he does it multiple times a game. And he's a marvel. Like his dad, he's got all the skill in the world, but he gets the ball almost 35 touches a game, and he does stuff with it. He's not an accumulator and just goes lateral. He slices teams up, and it's amazing to watch.
Very, very interested to see what Ross Lyon has planned for him this week. Very interested, because he's not getting 30. What did he have last week? 41 or 39 or 38?
Yeah,
he's not getting those
38.
numbers this week.
No, you wouldn't think so. I think he kicked a goal or 2 goals as well. So and he hits the scoreboard. So
is Windhager available? Is he someone that you'd sit at half forward, or would you do the Port Adelaide? Have another look at the natural half forward running with him.
Put Lockie Jones on him. That worked real well.
Yeah.
I watched that pretty intently, and I don't really think there's. I think the stone cold dead set tag 1-on-1 isn't as prominent as it used to be. I think the way Ross plays is like a team defense, so they're going to probably all work together to do it. But at the end of the day, it's pretty hard to stop him, isn't it? And what is he, 19 or 20?
He's played 20 odd games, 20 high 20s in games, unreal.
And this is my 5th. And before I get into my 5th, honourable mentions, I've got Tim Kelly, Petrarca, De Goey, LDU, and Tom Green could have probably been in this discussion. And again, this is my top 5, so feel free to come at me, listeners, as well. Number 5, I've got Jordan Dawson, Crows skipper. I watched his game on the weekend, and he absolutely sliced apart Freo by foot. I think he had 26 touches on the season, averages 24 disposals, 86% by foot, over 550 metres gained, 7 score involvements. For a bloke who doesn't necessarily rack up the high 30s, I just think his ability to hit targets, which is a premium. If you've got a leg like he does, he uses it to the best of his ability, and teams often suffer when they give him the time and space. So I think where Crows are, they're 2-2. They went down to obviously GWS and to Richmond. They really should almost be 4-0 if they didn't have those lapses. But I think Crows just have something special, bro. And I don't think they're going to be a massive contender for the flag or anything this year, but I think Jordan Dawson's a fair reason why they've actually got that potential to be at least a sort of lower-end finals team this year, in my opinion.
They appear to be sort of settling on what his role is as well. So it was like a pure halfback the first couple of weeks. That showdown where whether or not he was best on ground, he probably wasn't. He was still really, really good, let's be honest. It was up to about 60% midfield time, and it was pretty similar to that 50-50 sort of split against Freo. And that seems to be where I think fits best for him, because he probably had quite a say in helping Laird get off the chain a little bit, like another bigger body around the contest. But then when he does go to half-back, and that's sort of the fear with Nick Dacos, I don't want Collingwood to start shoving him in midfield because he's so damaging when he gets the ball in a little bit of space. So I think that mix feels about right at the moment for Dawson as well.
And yeah, that rounds out
That rounds out the list. I like it. I think from a personal point of view, love it. Feel like LDU probably could have been squeezed in somewhere.
I think LDU's my 5.
But he missed that game, so I can understand if that hurts him in the criteria.
It evolves, Robbo.
It does, yeah.
Dawson might not last.
The rolling top 5.
And as you say, it's your list, so we can't criticise it. Let's look at it from a ruck point of view now, in terms of who's the best of the best. So if you're drafting up, let's say we've got 2 All-Australian spots, as is normal. Tim English is probably getting one of them through the first month of the season and projecting forward. Who is in line for that second spot at the moment? Are we talking Rowan Marshall? Can Sean Darcy work his way in there? Where does Brodie Grundy sit? Jacko, you got some thoughts?
I think we were talking Toby Nankervis until this syndesmosis is going to have him out for a little while. He started the season really, really well, and we might speak a little bit about Richmond later and where they sort of sit. But Toby Nankervis had started really nicely. Don't sleep on Brodie Grundy. Hadn't played a lot of footy the last couple of years. That game up at Brisbane, going in expecting to be essentially number 2 ruck, thrown into the thick of it against Oscar McInerney, who probably sits somewhere in the top 6 or 7 rucks in the competition, and did really, really well. And then the Bailey Williams thing last week was, and we spoke about this with Sean Darcy, you just need to feast on the carcass a little bit, don't you? You need to come in and and make that count. And he did that on the weekend. So don't sleep on Brodie Grundy. We're going to get, there was something floating around that Max Gawn potentially not this week, next week. He's an older guy. He's done knees before. He's going to be another few weeks away. So we're going to get a good extended look at Brodie Grundy. Probably not All-Australian at the end of the year, because he'll end up... who was the last ruck to have split ruck duties and finished All-Australian? Probably Dean Cox.
Cox and Nat Nui when they both made it the same year. Yeah.
I can't see that happening with either of Gawn or Grundy. I think they probably both miss out. But as far as pure ruck craft goes, don't sleep on Brodie Grundy.
I think Witt's probably, if he pulls together a whole season, he started really well, obviously missed on the weekend, but if he puts together 17, 18 games of the quality he started in round 1 and 2, he's in the discussion. I don't think he'll make it, but I think he has to be considered as well.
Are you a Rowan Marshall guy?
I'm a Rowan Marshall. I do like the mobile ruckman. Gawn's obviously he's not that, doesn't lug around. He's very mobile. Remember that prelim final in 2021 at Optus where he's kicking those goals from 50.
Yep.
Rowan Marshall's got that ability, and I think English, obviously, going behind the ball, he can take marks, he can go forward, kick goals. So those guys, Grundy in his peak as well was...
absolutely.
Well.
And Marshall's going to be helped by the spike as well. If St Kilda they're not going to maintain a 4-0 start, obviously, but if they can rush into finals, he's going to be obviously a big reason for that, and that's going to help his case All-Australian-wise no end. All
right. Couple of Richmond injuries. So Nankervis, we just sort of floated there. Tom Lynch is another. Do we sort of they're a little bit light in both of these departments now, right?
You can make a case that's their 2 most important guys, just about. You can make that case.
Nankervis, you're probably looking at Soldo, who they tried to ship out the door a few months ago, and then I think it probably locks Samson Ryan into the side now for an extended stint. So I think that's probably the 2, and then Jack Rewalt rested on the weekend, which now looking at it's probably a good thing because he's going to have a really good run at it. And then someone like a Ben Miller might be thrown down there. You probably don't want to lose your Noah Bolter from your back line. So I think there's going to be a serious reshuffle at Richmond. And they're a team that I know I was probably a little bit 50-50 on them. Like, they could win the flag, they could miss the finals for me still at the moment. But I'm a little bit down on them with these injuries. I just wanted to sort of float that and see where we sit on them now, because Nankervis is, could be up to 8 weeks. Lynch could almost be a season, a big guy trying to rehab a foot injury like that.
Yeah, it's a great question there. I think Nankervis, you look at him as a ruck, and he's not the flashy ruckman, doesn't necessarily always put it down the midfielders' throats and has those terrific clearances like some ruckmen are able to do. But he also is, I think, top 3 or 4 in tackles, I think, in the comp as well. So he actually can do a little bit more than just tap the ball down. Richmond are a weird one for me. I had them 4th in my pre-season ladder because I thought the additions of Hopper and Taranto were 2 players that actually they really needed. They needed to rejuvenate that midfield a little bit, can play dusty forward more. Cochin is kind of this is his last year, you'd assume, and I've just been a little bit down on Hopper. Hasn't been as good as I thought he'd be.
Yeah.
And there's been that commentary, I think, around Taranto. Someone in the media said he's the worst kick in the AFL. I can't remember who said that. But again, he's a in and under clearance player, so he's not always going to go at high percentages by foot. But yeah, Hopper's been not underwhelming, but he probably hasn't reached the heights of what I thought he has. Taranto's been pretty good.
Yeah. So Hardwick came out a couple of weeks ago and I think admitted that they haven't used Hopper as well. They haven't looked for him as much as they could to support. So that's going to take a bit of time to adjust to. Just looking at their next fortnight, they got Sydney this week and then Melbourne after that. They've only got one win on the board. They could be one win through their first 6 games.
Yep.
They're highly likely to be one win through their first 6 games, which is not a great grounding if you're going to challenge for the flag. So, yeah, they've got some serious questions to try and figure out there.
All right, moving on, and we'll keep it Port Adelaide. As I said earlier in the show, since 2001, I've supported this team, and I've been through the ups and downs. There's been the 07 Premiership, 07 Grand Final getting flogged, the 04 Premiership and winning, been through heartbreak with a couple of prelims, but ever since
that whole era where you had to cover up the empty
tarps.
Seats with the tarps, it's probably the toughest
so
part
I've
of all
put on my notes. I'm going to talk about the curious case of Ken Hinkley. He revived Port post Matthew Primus, which was a pretty dark day in Port Adelaide.
That was peak tarp
history.
Era.
That was tarp, yeah.
That
right
was,
in the meaty part of the
when
tarp.
Paul Stewart was, kicking goals on the run and sinking the Kangaroos.
We're definitely the only
Amy
podcast
Stadium.
that's mentioning Paul Stewart this entire year, maybe decade.
I've got more, mate, if you want
Was
me
that
to.
Angus Montfrey's goal the only high point of that era?
That was 2013 when Hinkley was. So that
he was in, was he?
Primus was before that. So don't fact check me on Port, mate, because I got you. This is his 10th season. 2, 4, 6, 8. This is his 11th season. So he started in 2013, Ken Hinkley, and since 2013, he's made 3 prelims, a semi-final, and an elimination final. He's gone 126 and 89 in that tenure, which is about a 70% win rate.
Yep.
Looking at those numbers, you'd be like, that is a great figure. Like that's a great win percentage for a club that notoriously, they haven't been that successful in the AFL. They've always been relatively competitive, but they've only won one flag since 1997. They were obviously one of those sort of expansion teams back in the 90s when they were growing the game. But for Port Adelaide, I think Ken Hinkley, for someone that did so well in certain periods when he came in and revived Port in 13 and 14, that was amazing for Port supporters because it was such a dark time prior to that. And then in the 2020 and 2021, the prelim finals, like 2020 against Richmond, who were really, really good at that stage. I think they lost by 11 points, I think, in that prelim. And then we won't speak about the 2021 prelim, which was, the red carpet was rolled out for a grand final berth, and they've cooked that. I didn't come out of my room for a few days post that one. And then really disappointing last year. And then going into this season, they pumped Brisbane round 1. They looked $1 million after half time. They weren't that good in the first half, but looked really good in the second half against a premiership favourite. They get smoked by Collingwood and look like one of the worst teams in the AFL. Round 3, they were competitive for most of the game and then just ran out of legs in the last quarter. And then they have pulled out a miracle win against Sydney at Sydney, which isn't an easy win for any team. My question to you, where's the line for Port this year? If they don't make a grand final, let's just say they bow out in a semi-final, is that enough for you to re-sign Ken Hinkley because his contract expires? What's the line for you, Robbo and Jacko? Where is it anything but a grand final and see you later?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? I mean, finals is just a must. Let's get that out there first of all. If they don't win a final, it's getting harder and harder to make a case for keeping him. So I'd suggest it needs to be at least second week of the finals, either the second or third. If they make a prelim, I think you could probably argue that's enough progress. But then again, I'm looking at the look in your eye and it's not quite enough.
Well, we talk a lot about like contract year players here, right? And Ken Hinkley feels like he's been on his last chance for about 3 years. And I think that in itself is admirable. And he spoke on Saturday night about sort of embracing the pressure. And sure, a lot of that pressure comes because they've lost like big stretches of games. So a lot of that 70% is sort of like lumped in the middle in those prelim years. But I think the other factor in this line, and I'm probably the same, I'm probably sort of second week of the finals, what's out there, right? Because like Clarko's been snapped up, Ross has been snapped up. I know Ross was one that sort of floated around. Like you're going to an untried coach, and maybe we're probably going to an untried coach, maybe that is what they need. I can't know sort of Port Adelaide legends in the coaching rank sort of jump off the page off the top of my head. So where do you go? And I think that might give him a little bit of extra leeway in that there's not like an obvious candidate.
Well, what's out there? You don't know. So that's just my spiel on Ken Hinkley. It's a very mysterious situation for him because I don't know where they go from here, because I actually think even if they make a second final, are they just kind of going around in circles and doing the same thing, rinse and repeat?
But that's why it's so hard, because he's been, as you say, consistent in his inconsistency in terms of going up and down, but that winning clip, I mean, he's got the most wins of any coach to never have made a grand final. So it's kind of the double-edged sword where all you want from your coach and all you want from your club is to be in contention most years, and that's what Port Adelaide have been. But then if you can't take that next step, is it better to cut and run, or is it better to say, hey, we're going to get there eventually?
Well, and that's something that Chris Scott spoke a lot about at the end of last year. Like, for our fan base, we'd rather them see us in contention every year for 10 years. And Port have almost done that, but not quite, right? Like, they've stuck to a similar line and done that sort of Geelong, like, where like mini rebuilds and that sort of thing to try and, go into trades to try and contend. They just haven't done it quite as well. And it's a good point. Like, do you tread water now? Do you bottom out? They probably don't have a list to bottom out because they've got Rosie, Butters, Horn Francis, Georgiades, Aliyah. They're built far too good to bottom out. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting position to be in. The other factor, like Ken Hinkley, I feel like, and let me know as a Port fan, but I feel like he's the sort of coach you'd get around. Right, like he's super passionate about the club, goes into bat for his players, saw how passionate he was on Saturday night and after showdowns in the past and that sort of thing. So I feel like he's probably someone that if you were a dyed-in-the-wool Port Adelaide fan, you'd probably gravitate towards him a little bit as a good club man.
Final word to you, Jake. Is he, this time next year, is he still coaching Port Adelaide?
I don't think so.
Interesting. All right, let's get into some hardball bets.
Hardball bets. Thanks to the Tab Touch app.
Well, it is Hardball Bets, brought to you by Tab Touch. Got the touch this AFL season? Better your bet with Tab Touch. Gamble responsibly. Call Gamblers Help on 1-800-858-858. Last week, we both got off the mark, Jacko. You're on behalf of Nick Rinn. I just took the safe option and took the 215 or 220 for Geelong and Melbourne to finish the round strongly. So I'm off the mark. You got off the mark in some serious style. What was yours paying?
It was upwards of $7.50.
Upwards of $7.50 for those of you who got on. There was a bit of it was an Essendon by 39 or less and a couple other things thrown in there as well.
There was total points in the North game under the roof, which got up, and then can't remember it was the Demons. The Demons at I think it was a 44.5 line, which I was pretty happy
which was never really in doubt in that second half. What have you got for us on behalf of Nick Rinn today?
So they worked for me last week, so I'm going to have a look at some lines again. Brisbane by 29.5 or more. That's Essendon, I think they've got this week out at. I think they're in the hills at Mount Barker. Geelong, 43.5 is the line against West Coast, but Adam Simpson talking about resting some of the youngsters, and some of the youngsters are pretty good.
You feel like that line's going to nudge up a little bit? I feel like that's going
to be covered. They've got their tails up the Cats. And Melbourne at a 23.5 point line. I think they cover that against the Dons.
Okay, so bag it all up. What's it paying?
$6.86.
$6.80. So you're taking another decent sized swing here. Worked for you last week.
Well, hey, I'm a fill-in, so no point mucking around while I'm here.
You're the Braden Sire of the podcast. I'm not worrying about lines. I'm just taking 5 straight-up winners. I think Carlton will do Adelaide on Thursday night, even though that looks like a really tempting 50-50 proposition. I agree with you on Brisbane. Melbourne, obviously. Geelong, obviously. And I think Collingwood will snap the Saints winning run to start the season. That's paying $4.70.
Is that game of the round?
Collingwood St Kilda.
Yeah, I think it might be the Sunday twilight.
It's so
game of the
Carlton
round.
Adelaide to open, and then Collingwood St Kilda to close.
Bookends.
2 real nice bookends for gather round. Jake, what do you reckon, mate? We're on to a couple of winners there? Or
Yeah,
are you
I think
consumed?
so. I very much like the Melbourne line. I think Essendon's very much inflated just with who they've played, and I think Melbourne are far too good not to cover that line, absolutely. But tell you what, Bulldogs at where they're priced against Port,
Which is what?
which is $2.58. I think a little investment in that probably wouldn't go astray.
Spoken like a true Port Adelaide fan who knows.
I'm trying to stay away from Port, but that just jumped out of the page to me.
Knows the absolute yo-yo value. Well,
Happiness insurance.
As always, gamble responsibly, and thanks to our friends at Tab Touch. Gentlemen, we've got to get out of here. Jacko, thanks very much for your efforts as always. Jake, good to have you back after the 4-year hiatus. Did you enjoy it?
Oh, mate, loved it. So anytime, mate, just come down to my end of Channel 7 and knock on my door.
We'll give you a shout. Thanks, guys. And thanks also to our friends at Mazda and the Mazda BT50. You do ute. Enjoy your weekend of footy. We'll chat to you next time.